What's up? It's Jared Cagle. This is a podcast called Burning Questions because we are answering your burning questions. For our first episode, we have a very special guest, and her name is my wife.
Yes.
That's not actually her name.
No.
But she is my wife. Her name is Kaylin Cagle now.
Mm-hmm.
Used to be Shannon.
Yep.
How are you?
I'm pretty great.
You doing great?
I'm a little chilly, but I'm good.
Chilly? Is it cold in here?
It's a tidbit cold.
Is it the ice?
It's probably this ice right here.
It's not the fire, but it's the ice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. We're going to dive in. You brought us a special gift because we always have a candle.
Yeah. This is probably the best one you've ever had. It's Vanilla Woods.
Vanilla Woods. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything you want to talk about this guy right here?
Nope. It just smells like Christmas to me. I don't know. Coffee, maybe. It smells like coffee and Christmas and just good things.
Good things. Good vibes.
Yeah.
It's going to help us talk.
It will. And hopefully it can keep us warm, too.
You're really cold. Huh?
I'm so cold.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll work on that.
Yeah.
I think once we get in, it'll change the game for you.
Probably.
Welcome. We're
Thank
excited
you.
to have you. This podcast is designed to where we can answer some burning questions.
Mm-hmm.
Hence the candle,
Yes.
hence the burning, and hence the cold, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. It
Yeah.
helps us.
Yeah.
So today's question is a hard question. It's a big question. We wanted you to come in and help us unpack this question, right?
Mm-hmm.
That several people honestly have been asking. And that question is down on the floor. So let me read this question for us, okay? And then I want you to help us talk through this. I've seen God take away my friend's dad, which led to her walk away from her faith. How can a God who is so perfect allow her to go through all of that pain and suffering?
Hard question.
Hard question.
Okay.
For sure.
I think that this question is so hard because for believers and for non-believers alike, because nobody likes to think about God as being this God who is good and kind and loving, but he allows his children to suffer and sometimes go through unimaginable pain. And that's hard to wrestle with, especially when you think about how he could take it away if he wanted to. You know, he could have kept the pain from happening if he wanted to. So I think that's where people have a hard time grappling with that. And that's why it's so hard and emotional to think about. But I think that suffering can lead you a couple different ways. I think that suffering and pain can be the thing that drives you straight to the feet of Jesus, where you realize Jesus is everything. He's all I'm ever going to need. He is the only hope that I will ever have. And it can also be the thing that that puts like a giant wedge between someone and Jesus. Yeah. Like it can be the thing, like you come up to a storm or like a terrible situation. You get like a diagnosis that's terrible, or you lose a child, and you're walking through this storm and you decide that you don't trust God because he could stop it. He could heal you. He could do something, but he's not. And, or you think he's not, and you just decide, okay, I don't want anything to do with this God. So I think that those are two scenarios that can happen because of pain and because of suffering. But what I have to come back to when I'm looking at it is I just have to come back to reflecting on who is God? Like, what is his character? God is good. God is kind. God is loving. And I know this because his plan was never for us to live in a world where evil and pain and suffering existed. And they came into the world because of Satan. And when they did, he already had a plan to save us. He already had a plan to redeem us back to him because that's how much he wanted us. That's how much he loves us. So, and that's why he's perfect. That's perfect love. And, so I don't know, for me, you know, when I'm looking ahead at the storm or when I'm in the storm, like I have to come back to that. And, the purpose, you know, the reason why we're here is not to have an easy life. You know, it's our purpose is to live a life where people can look at us, and no matter what we're doing and no matter what we're going through, people will look at us and they see Jesus reflected. Yeah. And if that means he's reflected in our pain, like people need to see that. The world doesn't have hope apart from Jesus, and people are looking at us to see him. And pain is really consuming. Like it just eats you alive when you're in the midst of it, and it's consuming. And what I've learned is that hope is even more consuming, and that people need to see that, and people need to see hope can ignite hope in other people. So I just think that is what is important to keep in mind as you're walking through the storms.
Yeah. So you're not cold anymore.
I'm a little chilly. So
you're on
my
fire,
hands
girl.
I'm on fire.
Girl. Okay, so you've experienced a lot, and that's given you a platform to stand on when you say what you're saying. Because some people may be looking at us as we're talking about this question and thinking like, okay, great, that's a great answer, but you know, how can you say that? Yeah. So I wonder if you share a little bit of your story and what you've been through, especially over the last couple of years, and what God has brought you to be able to, or what God has brought you through to be able to answer the question the way that you did.
Okay. Okay. Well, I come from a family of 5. My mom, Mike, my dad is Mike, not my mom. Not Mike. My dad, Mike, my mom, Tane. Myself, I'm the oldest of 3 kids. And then my brother, Mick. And then we have a younger sister, Riley. And I'm going to start around like 8 or 9 years ago. And my brother had just I was in college. My brother had just graduated from high school, and he played football in high school, so he had to have a series of shoulder surgeries. And so he had just graduated, and he started off college by first having his wisdom teeth taken out, and then every 6 months after that, for 2 years, he had wisdom teeth. 6 months later, first shoulder surgery. 6 months later, another one. 6 months later, another one. So that started him on this cycle of surgery, pain, taking the pain pills, because that's, you know, what you do when you have surgery, rehab, or like rehabbing the shoulder. Yeah. And he was just in a lot of pain for a long time. He was taking the pain pills that were prescribed, and it just started him on this road of addiction. And we didn't know what was going on. But he, over the next, you know, those 2 years and the next couple after that, he was full on addicted to opioids and pain pills. And towards the end of that 4 years, like right around 2013, 2014, he was using heroin. In May of 2017, it was a Wednesday, and I'll remember that day for the rest of my life. And it just everything changed on this day. It was a Wednesday, and we were all, you know, heading to church, like just like normal. My mom was going to church, and we were on our way there, and she got a phone call, and it was one of Mick's best friends, and he said, "Tane, he's gone." And so it was I'm going to remember that day for the rest of my life, every single detail. The hardest day up to that point that I had ever experienced. It was during finals week, and he had finally, the first time he went to rehab, he had to leave college, and he was in his last semester. And this particular week, he was graduating college, like he was finally finishing. And he was just stressed, stressed with the finals and studying, and he relapsed and he overdosed and he was gone. And I don't remember. I know that I wasn't angry at God, but I felt so confused, in those days following Mick's death. I was just so confused because in my mind, this is where like I learned, like, even when you don't understand what God is doing in your life, like you just have to come to a point where you're you just trust him. God cares so much more about the strength of your faith than he does about keeping you from hurting. Mm-hmm. I think you may have said that on Sunday or something along those lines. And that, like, I learned that in a huge way at this point, because I had no clue why this had to happen, because Mick had so much going for him and he had so much life left to live. And he was going to be an optometrist, and he was going to help people with this incredible testimony that he had. He was doing so well and fighting his addiction with so much grace. And then this happened, and it just kind of blew everything. It just kind of blew everything out of the water for me. And my dialogue with God went something like, God, what the heck is this? Like, this feels a little anticlimactic because this is not how the story was supposed to go. This is not what was supposed to happen. And how are you going to get the most glory this way? Like, I could not understand. And that was what was hanging me up. But I had to get to the point where I just trusted God with Mick's story, and I had to trust that, like, God started something in him and through him, and he's going to finish it. Mm-hmm. And I had to get to the point where I didn't have to know the answers. I just had to have faith that God, he knows, like, he can see the whole scope of eternity, and he knows the impact that all of this is going to have on eternity. So I got there. I got there eventually. And, it was hard. It was devastating. It broke our hearts. But honestly, there was still peace. Like, Mick was not tormented anymore by addiction. He was whole and he was healed, and that was peaceful. So we just kept walking forward as a family, spent a lot of time together. I was so thankful that we had gotten to move home. I was confused about it back then, but then I was so thankful after all of that had happened, because the only thing that made things easier was being together. And then we just kept getting used to our new normal. And honestly, like, when God says my grace is sufficient for you, that is so true, because God gives such a specific kind of grace for specific circumstances. And he did that for us. We were still, like, able to feel joy and hope. And, like, the world says that that's not supposed to happen after you lose somebody like that, or after, but we still could. And that was just by the grace of God.
Something else to keep in mind too, that when thinking about this question, how can a God that's good allow this much pain and suffering? Our hope you touched on this, but our hope goes beyond the grave.
Yeah.
Our hope is beyond this life. And when we know that, when we're secure in our salvation and our faith is in Jesus, then we know that even if we don't have healing in this life, we're going to have it in the next, in heaven with Jesus. And that was some of the most significant relief from the pain that you and all of us felt in that season of great loss, to know that he is healed now. He is free and not walking through the same storm because he's in heaven. So then 10 months later came really quick. Out of nowhere. Your dad had a surgery and a knee replacement surgery, and then there was some clotting that happened. Thought he was sick with some sort of stomach bug. Went to the doctor to figure out what it was. Ended up being a heart attack. Didn't know it for a couple of days. In the hospital, you guys all thought that it was going to be okay. There's no way that God's going to take one more from us this soon. And the doctors thought they had it under control. They felt like the stent was effective. And then we get a call early in the morning to come because it doesn't look good.
Yeah. So my mom called me at 4:50 and, told me to come to the hospital. But even then, like, I didn't realize like how serious it was. I definitely did not think that my dad was dying, it just didn't hit me. I don't know why that was, but I will never forget the drive to the hospital that morning. Because I was just praying the whole way, like, God, heal my dad, like, please let him be okay. Please don't take him. You just took my brother. Just let it be okay, God. We can't do this again. And for some reason in my mind, like, it was a fairness issue, and I don't know why that is. I'm 29. Like, I know God, like, I know that fairness doesn't matter, but in my mind, I was like, it would not be fair for you to take my dad when we just went through this with Mick. We just lost Mick. So I got to the hospital and I knew immediately by the look on the nurse's face, like, it's not good. And we were waiting on my sister to get there because she was driving from Atlanta. And I got to see my dad, and I knew I didn't have a lot of hope at that point. And Riley finally got there. It was a long morning, like, a lot of things happened, but Riley finally got there. And you, me, Mom, and Riley all got to go back into his room where somebody is doing chest compressions on him, and that's what's keeping him alive. And because he had been coding all morning. And we go in and we're all praying because this is it. Like, we're there to say goodbye. But like, we have hope. We have hope that God can still do a miracle. Like, he could be okay. And we're all praying, but then Riley, she just goes for it. And she's just praying out loud, top of her lungs. All of our hands are up, we're raising our hands, and we're believing this. And she's just saying, God, like, heal our dad, heal him. We know you can heal him. We know you can do this, God, please. Yeah. But then she said, even if you don't, we still love you. We still trust you. And we're just like resting in that. And this guy is still doing chest compressions. And it was surreal, and nothing happened. We're sitting there and we're waiting on the miracle to happen, but nothing happened. And then the guy, he stops the compressions, and eventually Dad's gone, and we're all draped over him, and like, it was just gone, and that's the hardest moment of my life. And the first time that I had ever felt mad at God, it didn't last for long, but I have never felt anything like that kind of anger. I it hit me right after Dad died, and it was just like this rage came over me. And my blood started boiling, and I have never wanted to scream so badly in my life. And I wanted to like cuss at God at the top of my lungs, and I wanted to punch walls, you know? It was so real and like consuming. And it didn't last very long. All I could do was pray, and I didn't even want to pray because I was angry at God. But I was like, God, you do something. Just do something. That's all I could get out. Just move. Just do something. And he did. Like, all of a sudden, I didn't have that rage anymore. It just kind of washed away, and then like a calm came over me. It wasn't peace. I didn't understand what was happening, like what my life was anymore, but it was just like calm. And what he did was he reminded me in that moment that there are people, you know, in the hospital, like these nurses and these doctors and the family that you have that's on the way to the hospital. They need to see Jesus in this situation. Like they need to see hope in this hopeless situation. And you've got to be that. Like you have a responsibility. This pain is yours to steward well. And it matters how you walk through pain, and it matters how you steward the circumstances that you're given. And it just hit me so hard in that moment. Like I sometimes laugh when I think back at it, because you always used to say, you know, it's a stewardship issue. And I never felt the weight of that until that moment, because people just need to see Jesus in those kind of situations, you know? Yeah. So Dad passed away. It was an extremely hard day. We had to do another funeral, and our whole life is different now. Sweet mom had to sell, you know, her house that I grew up in with my family, and like everything is different now. And, but like I said earlier, like we're walking forward in victory, in faith, trusting that God does nothing in vain, that he's using it all, you know, like your pain is not wasted. And there hasn't been a day that's gone by where we haven't felt joy and hope. So
it's beautiful. It's beautiful, and you steward it well.
Thank you.
I'm biased, but I don't think I'm alone. I'll never forget that day in the hospital either. But I'll also never forget both funerals, because your mom requested King of My Heart to be played, which I always thought was strange, because it just says you are good over and over. And in these moments at a funeral, that is not what you want to say. You know, I mean, naturally, it's harder to see it. And that's the purpose of this question. This person is feeling the same thing, you know. But I'll never forget, it's seared in my memory. We were all in that front row, and your mom was the first one to raise both hands.
Yeah, she's pretty incredible.
In praise and belief that he is still good. Yeah. And even if we don't see what we count as victory in this life, we know that he doesn't wage a war that he's not going to win. And he has an eternity prepared for us. Yeah. And so that hope is so consistently at the forefront of our minds now. And we want to steward this pain well so that others can see that they can have that same hope too in the middle of their pain. So we're grateful for you sharing your story. Yeah, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you for being on. Thank you for the scent.
Yeah.
I'll remember this one.
Vanilla Woods.
96. Is that the brand? Just a quick plug.
Honestly, I don't know. It's a home goods purchase.
Okay. Give a shout out. I mean, they're not sponsoring us yet.
No.
But they may after they see this.
Yeah.
You know, 96, if you want to go, Vanilla Woods, it's a great scent.
Yep.
We love you guys. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Burning Questions. If you have a burning question that you've been longing for an answer to, DM us on our Instagram at CMC Students_.